Hello and welcome to the Daredevil Born Again official podcast. I am Wilson Bethel and I play the role of the deadliest assassin in the MCU. Thank you very much, Bullseye. Every week we're going to dig into each episode of Season 2, sharing behind-the-scenes stories and chatting with the cast and crew of Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again, now streaming on Disney+. On today's show, we're going to take a look back at all of the drama, the action, the intrigue, and yes, the most severe ass-kicking that took place in Season 1. I could not be more excited to start things off before passing the baton to our fearless leader and showrunner, Dario Scardapane, and Marvel Studios' head of television, Brad Winderbaum, my boss. But first, here's a recap of all the high-flying, heart-pounding events of Season 1. If you haven't watched it yet, you probably should. And afterward, come back. Matt, Foggy, and Karen enjoy a night out in Hell's Kitchen until Foggy is tragically gunned down by Bullseye, triggering a bloody rampage that ends with Daredevil throwing Bullseye off a building. Ouch. But this guy just won't die. Bullseye survives and is arrested, but the whole event is so devastating for Daredevil, losing his best friend, breaking his no-kill code, that he hangs up his mask for good. We jump ahead 1 year and Matt's got a thriving new practice with Kirsten McDuffie, and he's dating a psychiatrist, Dr. Heather Glenn. Civilian life seems to suit him, for now. With Daredevil on the sidelines, Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin himself, the crime boss of New York, returns to the city to run for mayor, and New Yorkers embrace him, even with his checkered past. Shockingly, Fisk pulls off the win. At first, Mayor Fisk seems restrained, assembling a team of decent people like Sheila Rivera and an intern, Daniel Blake, who Fisk eventually takes under his wing. But others don't mind getting blood on their hands, like right-hand man Buck Cashman. And it's not long before Anti-Vigilante Task Force starts targeting masked heroes and political opponents, like beloved local hero, the White Tiger. And just when you think things can't get any worse, meet Muse, a mysterious masked murderer who uses his victims' blood and street art around the city. With the city facing uncharted turmoil and people to him close in the crosshairs, Matt emerges as Daredevil, just in time to save Heather from Muse before she kills him herself. The action climaxes at a lavish mayoral ball where Matt discovers it was Fisk's wife Vanessa that ordered the hit on Foggy, only moments before taking a bullet for Fisk himself, a bullet from Bullseye's gun. With the manhunt for Bullseye underway, Fisk goes into Kingpin mode and unleashes his task force, sending them to kill Matt with full impunity. Not a very nice way to say thanks for saving my life, but luckily Punisher is there to assist in escape and some serious ass-kicking, and it's on the run that Daredevil and a recently returned Karen discover what the Fisks are up to. They plan to use an obscure legal charter to turn the Red Hook port into their own criminal sandbox. As chaos overtakes the city, a weakened Daredevil descends on the port to try and stop him. The Punisher's already there, taking on wave after wave of dirty cops who eventually outnumber him. With the stakes now set, Karen and Daredevil begin assembling allies for an underground resistance, setting up an epic collision between good and evil in Kingpin's New York.
Hey everybody, I'm Brad Winderbaum, head of Marvel Television, and I'm here with Dario Scardapane, our Daredevil Born Again showrunner.
Good to be here.
Season 1 is done. We're about to release Season 2. I mean, we got to talk about Season 1, the process for a little bit.
I mean, it was funny to get, I got sent all the material, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, you have that idea of like, well, what would I do? And then I remember meeting you guys and coming in like, oh, here's what I think. And then it was a whirlwind. Like, from that first meeting to the moment we wrapped Season 1, it was like, what, 5 months, 6 months? It was really fast.
Yeah.
But I'm very proud of it,
Same.
And it was, the thing I keep saying, and I think I said this to you when we started, this is the show it wants to be. And that's what makes it super exciting about Season 2, because Season 1, we had to make changes and we had to pivot and we had to do some kind of surgery, but Season 2 is truly 100% the show it wants to be.
Totally.
And I was wondering, like, how did you guys, when you sat down and you looked at what you had and you were like, okay, we need to make some changes, how did the process go at that point? Were you looking for, because I mean, I know that there were a lot of people that were in the mix, but were you looking for somebody who was in genre? Were you looking for somebody who had experience in the old shows? What was experience in the old shows on the list?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I loved the old shows. I mean, I got to, because they were produced by another part of Marvel at the time, I actually got to watch the old shows as a fan, as opposed to like work. When I watch anything from the MCU or the movies, it was always like to give notes. But Daredevil especially, but that whole era of Defender shows, I really got to watch as a fan. I love them, And I knew as we were working on the first season of Born Again, there was a big part of me that really was craving the DNA from that Defenders era of the series. So when we were looking for someone to help guide us through the process of bringing it home and reworking the first season and bringing it back to its roots, your name was very high on the list immediately because of your experience making shows during that era.
It's cool though, because like when you talk about watching it as a fan, it kind of shows in the way that we work together, in that it's always felt, and it's really, now that we're heading into season 3, it really feels like we are a corner of the MCU, but not, I mean, we're of it, but we're kind of siloed in a good way.
Yeah.
It's fun. I mean, I feel like we participate in this very large, sometimes unwieldy world, but we're a 10-block radius almost, you know, like, and now, particularly in season 1, you've carved out downtown in a political arena that then has ripple effects to other boroughs, but it never feels like we leave the planet. It always feels like we stay in a pretty, I mean, the word grounded gets thrown around, but when you have people running around in red suits, it's hard to say grounded, but it feels like we're in a New York that we can all feel connected to.
But I think that's one of your strong suits as a writer, as a showrunner, is that you're able to take these heightened concepts like a guy running around in a Halloween costume, and as Frank Castle would say, and keep it grounded.
And I was wondering, on like, because we don't talk, we were just laughing about how like we don't sit down like this that often, because there's usually a room full of people and there's notes and there's like, you know.
I mean, what's crazy is there's no one else here right now. They just let us run the cameras.
They just gave us these microphones. But like for you being in the Marvel world as long as you've been in the Marvel world, what makes Daredevil, when you guys, because I came in so late, what made you guys go, oh, we got to bring back Daredevil? Why was that one of the characters, considering all the bazillions of characters that you have, that you personally were like, oh, this one?
The second I heard that Charlie was going to be in Spider-Man,
that was it.
I was like, we got to make the show.
Cool.
It opened the door. Once the door was ajar, I like got a crowbar in there and started to kind of.
And was everybody was like, yeah, let's, because it's such it's such a weird thing that Charlie, Vincent, Bernthal, they were kind of over in this other silo, and you got to bring them in, and that was, I mean, you pretty much did that, correct?
Yes, and I mean, Kevin loved the idea from the beginning. I think the first incarnation of the show was trying to be a little too agnostic to the mythology of what came before, but actually what's cool about the show is that it's agnostic to the grander MCU. It exists in the world of Avengers. You know, the blip happened, the gems, all the crazy space battles, all that stuff's out there. But it is its own universe. And that's the way it always felt in the comics as well.
Because they're too concerned with what's going on in their rather fraught lives. The funny thing is that, I don't know, I when you say too agnostic, I'm not 100% sure of that. Because when season 2, and I don't want to jump ahead, one of the things that they did in the version of season 1 before I came in is they really leaned into Matt in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And as we've realized, as we kind of, this thing gathers its own steam, Matt in the courtroom is cool. It's money. We have to do it, you know?
Yep.
But how do we do it so it doesn't feel like a legal drama? That's always, when I sit down with the room, we know we have to have a courtroom element. But then we don't want it to look like Law and Order. No flies on Law and Order, but you know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I think.
Well, you expect him to put on the costume. You expect him to swing around the city. You expect him to kick ass.
And you expect him to be like a really good lawyer, you know.
Yeah.
There's just.
You need both sides of the coin.
Definitely. And that's been, when I came in and I looked at what we had for season 1, it was, I don't want to say obvious, but it was really, you could feel what the show wanted to be. And then talking to you, and particularly once I started talking to Vincent and Charlie, those guys knew exactly where they wanted to go. And it was, people keep going, I can't believe you guys did it I can't believe you guys pulled it off. It was truly threading a needle.
Yeah.
But once you knew what you wanted to do, it wasn't that hard, or maybe I have amnesia.
No, you don't. One of the best additions to season 1 was bringing in Bullseye. Can you tell me the thought process or why you felt like that character had to be part of the first season? And he's a huge part of the second season. And not to spoil anything, but like there's some sequences that are like among the best things I've been a part of at the studio.
Yeah, so proud of. And there's, so the thing about bringing Wilson, bringing Bullseye, when you think in terms of, for lack of a better word, icons in the Daredevil mythology, Bullseye is way, way up there. And then what Wilson did in season 3 of the Netflix show was some of the best villain work I've ever seen. And then you're like, we knew we wanted to shatter Matt's world, and the events of the first episode and I can say the death of Foggy, like I knew I was going to rattle a universe, and I didn't take that lightly. And so then you ask yourself, in canon, who was the person who took away most of the people that Matt loved? Bullseye. Okay, so, and Bullseye being connected to the Fisks in the previous incarnation, and being that kind of agent of chaos who causes Matt an immense amount of pain, and being a sympathetic villain, of course. Bullseye I think Bullseye was in my original pitch.
He was.
And once you have him in the world, I have certain fan faves as a fan.
Yeah.
Bullseye, Karen, some people who will not be named because it would give too much away, and the Punisher are fan favorites.
Yeah.
And we knew he had to bring him back in, and he does a horrible thing, and we spend the next season discussing that horrible thing from a lot of different angles, and that I kind of knew that was coming.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, I love that, in the comics, obviously, as fans know, Bullseye famously kills Karen Page. In our series, we flip it. He kills Foggy Nelson instead, and you see the relationship between Matt and Karen, evolve in the wake of this tragedy.
I refuse to believe that a tragedy had to destroy everything.
But it did. What are you gonna do about Daredevil?
I made a promise to myself that I'd let the system handle it. All of it. Besides, I'm not him anymore.
So we're talking about the fans here, and this feels like the perfect time to kick it over to one of our executive producers and super fan in her own right, Sana Amanet. She's gonna dip into the Marvel mailbag and answer a few fan questions.
Hi, I'm Sana Amanet, one of the executive producers of Daredevil Born Again, and I'm here with some fan questions about season 1 to set the table for us. Fan questions make me so nervous. Okay. How long have you been a fan of Daredevil? For a very long time, because I started out at Marvel 16 years ago as a comic book editor, and I got to actually make a lot of these comics. So what we're working on, a little bit of what we're working on now, are some of the comics I worked on back in the day. So for me, it is so cool. I think Daredevil is one of the coolest characters that we have. He's really edgy, even though he's kind of problematic with what he does, but he's really cool. So I would say for at least 16 to 20 years, I'm a fan of Daredevil. What's it like filming a show about New York in New York? Amazing. We're so lucky that we get to film in New York City. I'm from New York. I was born in New York. I went to school in New York. And to me, it was an awesome homecoming. What's also great is that it is so essential to the Marvel Universe and Daredevil, because that is what the comics do so well, is that they talk about the streets in the city. And so for us, it was really cool to be able to have the backdrop and not do a green screen of the buildings and the skyline of New York. We were actually able to be there, which was awesome. My favorite thing, though, is when you're rolling and everyone is taking it so seriously. These are big, important scenes, and New Yorkers do not care. They don't care who you are. And they will walk right through a scene and go about their business. So I think that's pretty awesome, and that's why I love it. New York welcomes you, but actually doesn't really care what you're doing or how important you think you are. So they keep us humble. Generally speaking, how do you view the relationship between the show and the comics? It's a great question for me as a former comic book editor. I think it's so important because, you know, I think we stand on the shoulders of really great artists and creators and writers at Marvel Comics. And a lot of what we're making is inspired by folks like Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli and, you know, Brian Michael Bendis and Charles Soule and Chip Zdarsky and Mark Waid and all these really, really great, and Paulo Rivera. I can go on and on and on, like really great, talented comics artists. And we're inspired by what they've given us, and we try to make it sort of evolve it and sort of take it to a place that is believable both in its history as a comic book, but also as a live action interpretation. You know, for a show like Daredevil, which is very real and grounded, it's still about a character who is blind with heightened senses.
Hold on a sec.
Hands in the air, you silly bastard!
Kirsten, call 911.
So we have to really strike that balance. So ultimately, we look at the intention behind the comics, and there's such great messages about heroism and villainy and the ego and the id, and ultimately the complicated choices, especially someone like Daredevil makes. I mean, he is someone who fights justice in the daylight as a lawyer, and then at night kind of breaks all these laws and beats a lot of people up in the process in the aim for justice. So what does that say about a character like him? And the comics explored that so well, and us being able to do that in live action form is really exciting, but also is so truthful, I think, and accurate. Okay, what's your favorite moment from season 1? I have too many favorite moments, but one of them is at the end of episode 108. I loved the ballroom dance, and because it was all of our characters for the most part together in this dangerous dance of impending death and vengeance. And I love this moment where Kingpin whispers,
What were you looking for? Devil.
and it was just such a cool, classic Vincent D'Onofrio moment. And it was also while he's in the middle of a dance, just doing like finger guns, which you don't see Kingpin ever do. So I loved that whole sequence, and it ended so dramatically. And of course, Matt Murdock saves Kingpin because, of course, he's inevitable. He's like, they're forever tied. Oh God, and Punisher showing up, of course. Loved it. Punisher and Karen always. Punisher and Daredevil and Karen. Oh, God, love it. What was your favorite day of shooting? Was there a favorite scene you got to witness? I will say the moment that, I mean, there's so many amazing scenes. For me, also, season 1, as a fan coming on, just being with Charlie and Vincent and being able to work with them and seeing the magic that they bring is always so special. Also, when we had Charlie, John Bernthal, and Deborah Ann Wall in a room together, who respective characters, of course, Daredevil, Punisher, and Karen Page are all in a room together. And it was this small little set, and I was so excited. It was a really cool moment to be there as a fan. I actually saw them just talking in the hallway before, actually, I think after we wrapped. And I walked past them, I'm like, do you understand the three of you standing together, how cool that looks? Like, it was just a surreal moment for me. Even though I live and breathe the show for the last 3 years, it's still cool every time. No spoilers, what are you most excited for season 2? Well, we end season 1 in such a, I mean, it's a pretty dark place, but it feels like Daredevil's about to rise again. And for me, that is gonna be really exciting to see, especially considering that he's lost. You know, our hero has lost, the villain has won. So seeing what he's about to do in season 2 is gonna be my favorite. And knowing what's coming in season 2 is very exciting, because I think we've done some of my favorite work thus far. I'm gonna throw it to my partners in crime, Dario Scardapane and Brad Winderbaum.
Welcome back. Can you kind of remind us where we left off with Matt and Karen at the end of season 1, and maybe tease what we have?
Absolutely.
We got a taste of it in the trailer, but tease a little bit of where we're going.
I mean, I really, and I remember how it was coming together when we were watching the last 5 minutes of season 1, all of us together. And you're like, we're writing a lot of checks here in terms of the story that we were throwing forward that we needed to cash later. And I really enjoyed, over the course of the Netflix season, the relationship between Matt and Karen. But one of the things we all tried to do when we came into this was not deny the 7 to 10 years that happened in between season 3 of Netflix and season 1 of Born Again. So given what happens at the end, you know, the kind of call to arms, the idea that it's going to take an army to topple Fisk. So what does that mean for Matt and Karen? And we wanted to push their relationship into a kind of, for lack of a better word, more mature. They're older, they're wiser, and they're up against something monolithic. So in season 2, as much as we could talk about it, they become both really, really tight as a couple, but it's a crazy, almost Casablanca resistance relationship where they're partners in arms. She's much more formidable than she's ever been, but is that real? Can that last? And that's fun. And as everybody knows, I'm a really big fan of Deborah Ann Wall. I think that her and Charlie have amazing chemistry. And where we landed it with them, really kind of, now that I look back at the end of season 1, I kind of chuckle to myself about like, oh, wait till you see what happens.
I love it so much. I mean, I don't think it's too much of a giveaway. I think it's kind of implied in the trailers, but like they are closer than they've ever been, but it's because they're revolutionaries.
Yeah,
I mean
they're
that's
in a foxhole together in a way. And what happens, I mean, it's always a thing of like,
what happens if they win?
Yep.
The way we left them off at the end of season 1, it was their backs were up against the wall. They had no resources. They're hiding out in Josie's and they're trying to find allies. And it's like, who's out there? And how do you even build a resistance against something like Fisk when he's got, you know, his tendrils into everything?
He's one with a capital W. Yeah, I'm grateful to the studio for being so like, yes, Karen Page. You know, that wasn't anything, you know, because I think people know that she wasn't in the original, and neither was Foggy really. It was all kind of off screen. It was all mentioned what had happened before with the 3 of them, and embracing bringing her back, and not just bringing her back as a repetition of what she was in season 1, but bringing her back with an eye towards evolution, revolution. Like the funny thing is all of season 2, the seeds got completely sown in our conversations in season 1. Like, here's what I'm thinking of going for, and honestly, Marvel was kind of nonstop supportive about the longer throws, and that was fun. I mean, I knew we were going to have to pay off stuff later because season 1 was what season 1 was going to be was very finite. We knew kind of had to end with Fisk winning.
Yep.
So where do you go next? And that's been a blast. I mean, I guess the best way to kind of say the evolution of season 1 is Matt and Fisk are struggling or trying to keep their alter egos, for lack of a better word, at bay. I would say it's their true selves. So Matt goes through a really hellish trauma. His best friend is murdered. He receives justice in terms of Bullseye's put away for life. His relationship with Karen falls apart. You know, trauma wreaks havoc. So he decides, I'm going to become Matt Murdock, lawyer, Daredevil's in the past. And for a moment, that works. And then Fisk becomes the mayor of New York. So that's kind of your first act in terms of, I'm going to hold it back. I'm going to be the person that doesn't cross lines, doesn't throw people off buildings, doesn't jeopardize my loved ones. And then the biggest stressor in his life is now the mayor of the city. And for a while, he behaves. He's good in that. But then Fisk does what Fisk does and starts to choke the city. On the flip side of the coin, and it's one of the reasons I think that in many ways, the entire theme of the season is in the diner sequence.
Let's say I followed a road less traveled, and at its end I found a new man.
The mayor of New York.
Soon.
So, answer me this. Why is it I can't shake the feeling that you're gaming the system?
Fisk is trying to do something different. Fisk is trying to actually be the mayor, and I believe him. But he can't help himself but squeeze too tight. And then as kind of the center spins out of control, nothing can hold, Matt makes that decision to be who he is.
So you know, it's interesting that both men are going against their true natures, and they're resisting it. What I love about the way you laid out season 1 was He puts away the suit because of Foggy's death, and he tries to walk the straight and narrow. Fisk becoming mayor starts to squeeze him, but it's really Muse that makes him put back on the suit at the end of the day. And it's tied. What's great about it being Muse is because Muse is an agent of chaos, and it's also, and this is something that you added, it's Angela Del Toro who's at risk of being murdered by Muse. That's the reason he puts out, which is tied to the amazing court case with Hector Ayala that starts the season.
Actually, I can't take credit because the move of all moves was when you were like, what if Angela ends up one of Muse's victims? And I was like, yes, you know?
It's a collaborative art.
But it was one of those things, because every once in a while there'll be that like, what if?
Yeah.
That opens up a longer run. And you see, I mean, it was one of those things, and I mean, this was entirely manufactured. The Hector Ayala story in Act 1 then turns into the Angela Del Toro story in Act 2, which pushes Daredevil into the suit and into actually becoming hero of the city in Act 3.
Yep.
None of that was in the original version of it wasn't.
But it was amazing to see, you know, the puzzle get put together, how cleanly you were able to, especially Matt's, you know, descent and return arc. He puts away the suit, he's lying to himself, he's trying to be the trial lawyer. In a way, there's a meta-narrative there when you think about the original incarnation of the show. And then when he puts on the suit, it's embracing everything that Daredevil is in a bigger way than he's ever done it before, because now he is fighting against the mayor of New York.
And what's again, when you take the things that were in there, when I talk about how you want it to, there's something it wants to be, midway through the season, right almost at the halfway point, that's when Frank's basically telling him, what are you doing? Like, oh, okay, great. Are you doing right by Foggy by like trusting the system?
Yep.
And I love how Frank, in Matt's world, kind of is, he always says, you know, you're one bad day away from being me. But he's also kind of the one who pokes the self-righteous bubble that Matt can get into. So it's funny to go from tragedy to lawyer walking the straight and narrow to full-blown Daredevil. Because that we knew we wanted to, by the end of season 1, he is Daredevil. Like, and he is going to embrace being Daredevil and kind of dive into that persona. And that's where we kind of push him towards in season 2.
And by the end of the season, there's the penultimate episode, Matt is completely unhinged in season 1. And you know, can you talk about like,
well, the world's gone upside down for him. Like,
yeah.
that's a funny thing. Like, and I remember talking to Charlie about this. He's like, hold on. Like, vigilantes are being hunted. Fisk is the mayor, you know, celebrating himself in his white suit at a grand ballroom. And for Matt, at that point, he's lost his mind. And in a good way. He just, the tension of trying to wear the Matt Murdock suit, it's just cracking all over the place. And that, the ballroom sequence, as far as being ambitious, and, you know, we've talked about it with Justin there, and that was so much fun and so nerve-wracking, where it's like, can we pull this off? Can we pull this off? Because logistically speaking, you have every member of the cast there. They're all in one big room. You're trying to tell a story, and the amount of moving parts was crazy, but it made perfect sense. It was one of those times where it's like, we have to get everybody together, and Matt has to be bonkers.
I love, there's a shot that Aaron and Justin did in that episode that just kind of tracks around the ballroom from conversation to conversation. You get a taste of everyone, Swordsman, BB, Heather, Vanessa, everyone. It's really incredible.
And they're really kind of great at setting tension. Because what I love, and now this would be giving away far too much, but right now we're in that same place in the writer's room in season 3. And when you look at your penultimate episode, it's always one that you really have to answer a lot of questions, but bring a level of tension. And the funny thing is, that walk through the ballroom, you know something's happening.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you just
It's
feel
a
like,
powder
oh,
keg.
something's gonna jump off here.
There's a feeling in the air, and I remember actually being on the mix stage with you and getting the sound of the music in the room right.
That was cool. I mean, that's one of the things that I have to say, and it every day, because we spend a lot of time in post, the post team on this show is the best I've ever worked for.
Oh, come on.
By far.
They are
by far.
amazing.
They're amazing.
They're incredible.
And when it comes to like doing the sound design and getting it right and everybody kind of geeking out, like we have a guy who's wandering through whose main sensory input is his ears.
Yeah.
You know, we have another guy who has extremely good aim.
Yep.
And we have this large kind of self-aggrandizing monster in the middle of it. It's so fun.
Yeah.
And we're, you know, I know that a lot of people were like, okay, season 1 has brought it back into the place that they feel really good about as fans, and they're like, I'm in, you know? And I feel like we, like you said, we wrote checks. We made promises in season 1 that we've got to pay off in season 2, and I feel pretty good about how we're doing.
I feel very good about it. I'm so excited for people to see it. Could we talk about like a member of the ensemble that I think kind of represents the line Matt tells himself at the beginning of season 1, and when you watch her fall from grace, it's really tragic, and she becomes a very kind of reviled character by the end, and that's Heather Glenn.
Matt Murdock?
Dr. Glenn, hi. Nice to meet you.
That was kind of like found gold in a way, because you don't realize, and I wish I was this clever, you don't realize somehow how you're using certain characters' mini arcs to echo larger arcs. So Matt experienced incredible trauma at the hands of a vigilante. How he dealt with that is kind of the grist for the mill of season 1.
Yeah.
Heather, as a victim, how she deals with that becomes she rushes towards the protection of the Fisk administration. Yeah. And then, without giving too much away, that story is not over. Like, so it was really interesting to see, and I think it was, Alan Moore did it really beautifully a lot in his work. Frank touched on it a lot in his. In classic superhero comics, the victim is like, oh, I've saved you, you know, and I've tied up the villain and we're all done. But we're the what's the next frame after that? Yep. What happens once the villain's brought to justice? What happens to the victim once they have to deal with trauma?
Yeah, and if I could talk a little bit about the trauma of these characters and how you really let people see their scars. Like nothing's forgotten. You know, as every experience these characters have, they carry with them, and it informs their choices.
Well, and that, I mean, I think that's part of, you know, the funny thing is you've got a character like Daredevil who's been around since 1964, and it's almost like the Grey's Anatomy thing. Every one of these characters has gone through so many, oh, you've had a car crash, you've been an alien, you've been a lawyer, you've been the mayor. And great. But in our world, it's kind of cool to remember what happened and have the characters remember it and then start building their choices off of that. And I think, again, found gold. I think that taking the Heather Glenn character that in the comics was pretty much a love interest that went nuts and jumped off a building, and start saying, well, this thing happened to her, this Muse situation where not only was Muse victimizing her, it was one of her clients. How do you get your head around that? And where do you go from there? And what we came up with as a collective effort, I think it's extremely entertaining and also like a little bit, wow, that's tough.
It's tragic. It's exciting.
And Margarita's kind of, look, she may disagree with me. Margarita is way more fun when she's embracing the dark side, so to speak.
It's a fun thing to watch without giving too much away.
Yeah, I mean, she's a really good actor, and when you give her intensity, she runs with it.
Yeah. Well, that was great.
Have a good time.
Thank you all for joining us for a look back at season 1 of Daredevil Born Again. So excited for you to see season 2, to see what Dario's been cooking up in the laboratory with his writers. And from everyone at Marvel, and on behalf of the entire Daredevil Born Again team, we can't wait for you all to see season 2 and to join us here on the official Daredevil Born Again podcast for every action-packed episode. I'm just improv-ing here.
You're magic right now.
Let's get out of here and get back to work.
I'm late on a script.
Come on, man.
Watch and listen to Daredevil Born Again, official podcast available on Disney Plus and wherever you get your podcasts. And stream Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again Season 2 on March 24th on Disney Plus.